Welcome to Beginning Ham Radio. We are sponsored by the Portland Amateur Radio Club. And tonight we're going to talk about 6 meters, kind of the considered or named the magic band. And Bruce Schaefer, AA7PB, is going to tell us a little bit about 6 meters. I've done it a little bit, but probably should be doing it a lot more than I am. It's a great band because if you have your technician's license, you're already set. So you can access 6 meters on all the frequencies. So I'm going to stop sharing, Bruce, and you can go ahead and share.
Okay, let's see. Right. Did it too quickly. Now it'll let me. Okay. Try to find the right window. Too many windows open.
The magic of Zoom. You know, as a person that does a lot of, not presentations, but leads a lot of these kind of meetings, I know a lot of people who do this, they will have 2 separate monitors or even 4 separate monitors for something like this. And I have one very large monitor, but I'm almost thinking it'd be better to at least have one more, just because it's like, it's like a juggling act. You have your chat, you have your presentation, you have the video of everybody else, and then you have a website that you have to bring in every once in a while if you want to reference other things.
So some of tonight's material I created spring of 2020, but I'll update the date to August 2021. I've updated some of the material. 6 meters is shorthand for the frequency range 50 megahertz to 54 megahertz. And we'll talk a little bit more about how that's subdivided. You get all the privileges regardless of what license level you have on this band. There are 3 ways to communicate. You can communicate like VHF, line of sight. Even though it behaves a bit like an HF band, if I think back, the definition of VHF starts at 30 megahertz, right? So it's officially a VHF band, but has some similarities to an HF band. One of those is that it can do E-layer propagation, which we'll talk a little bit about. And the other is occasionally it can do F-layer propagation, but not too often. So we'll talk about that a little bit. The FCC says that the first 100 kilohertz of the band is reserved for Morse code only, CW only. That would be 50.0 to 50.1. And from the FCC's point of view, the rest of the band, you can do anything, all modes. From the ARRL point of view, it's subdivided into subbands. Those are not enforced by the government, but they're highly encouraged by our National Association for Ham Radio, because it helps us share that band with better etiquette if we have some guidelines. And I'll talk about that band plan a little bit tonight as well. This diagram comes out of a technician license course that several of us teach. And I don't know the source of the diagram. I didn't personally create it. It might have come out of Gordon West's book on the technician license. During the daytime, there are 2 F layers, and there's always an E layer, but the question is, how charged up is it? And we'll talk about that. The D layer and the E layer discharge at night because they don't have the sun's radiation keeping the ions separated. The positive and negative ions recombine in the D and E layer at night and essentially become just regular air then at those levels. The 2 F layers combine into 1 F layer and lose some of their energy at night. but we're not going to talk too much about F. Let's talk mostly about E. E is even during the daytime is not reliably charged up for reflecting radio waves. And 20 meters and 15 meters and 20 meters and 40 meters, 80 meters, all those bands will not be reflected by the E layer. The 10 meter and the 6 meter wavelengths can be refracted by the E layer if there's enough charge. That typically occurs during the daytime in the spring and the first half of the summer, and sometimes in the winter in January and February, but not in any particular reliable time of day like most of the other bands. The 20 meters and above, you can pretty much know when by sunspots and time of day and time zone and a few other things, you can predict fairly well when you'll get propagation. The 6 meter band will magically come alive every so often for distance communication. It's always available for line of sight, but that distance communication suddenly becomes available certain times of the day, certain seasons. And that's why it's called the magic band. I've never actually experienced spurious E, that's the nickname for that surprise E propagation on the 6 meter band, but a long time ago I experienced on the 10 meter band where the same phenomenon occurs. There on the 10 meter band, when there's high sunspots, you can get good propagation predictably. Certain times of the day you can communicate between states. There was a period when I could reliably talk to Arizona, but not California, at least not Northern California from Oregon. And not and Idaho was too close as well. And there was a group of us having a regular conversation between multiple states when suddenly some very rude people took over our frequency. And one of our people, I think it was one of the other people, I'm not sure who, but expressed their irritation on this rude behavior. And somebody else, I don't think it was me, said, "This is not rude behavior. This is two groups of people that were communicating off of the F layer because of high sunspots. We had good F layer propagation during the day. And suddenly we got E layer propagation, and they connected all of us together on the same party line. And so we should enjoy this. It lasted for 15 minutes. And then we were back to our separate non-party line conversations. So that's the kind of thing that could happen on the 6 meter band, except it's very infrequent that you would get F layer propagation. But if we get enough sunspots 2 or 3 years from now, we may get some F layer long distance communication. E layer tends to be not as far because the bounce, I'd have to kind of draw the diagram. This diagram almost tells you the story. To get one bounce off the ionosphere, you can go a lot longer if that layer, that bounce is up higher. If it's a lower bounce on the E layer, then it comes back down at a more nearby location. And this diagram, while it's pretty illustrative, is not to scale, so you can't really figure out which bounce goes where by using this diagram. So that's a bit confusing, a bit magical. That's its name. Here's a little table. If you squint in the lower right, there's the table that says D layer is good for 25 to 55 miles. Usually don't bounce off the D layer too well. Usually it just absorbs energy. When the E layer is working, 55 to 90 miles. When the F layer is working at night, 90 to 250. Actually, can be a lot farther than that. That may be a single bounce. I'm not an expert on how many bounces it takes, but I've used the F layer to talk to Japan and Australia, and I don't have any instrumentation that would tell me how many bounces it took. But the salty Pacific Ocean is your friend because it bounces off the ionosphere and then off to salt water and back up to the ionosphere. Anyway, I was going to take questions. I'll stop talking.
Hmm.
I'm just curious if anybody's experienced 6 meters with E-layer propagation.
I did.
Oh yeah, hey Fred.
Yeah, 6 meter is called the magic band because you know, you don't hear anyone, and suddenly you can hear the other side of the US. So that's pretty impressive. You call CQ and you can barely talk to the guy across the bay from me, and suddenly you have a guy from Minnesota or New Mexico coming, and the fantastic thing is you talk to them like you are on the repeater. They come loud and clear with a very clear voice, and that's magic. And like Bruce said, 15 minutes later, or 20, or 10 minutes later, they're gone. They just disappear, and that's kind of the beauty of the 6 meters.
Nice. Yeah, that's pretty exciting that you can take a band that's normally just local communication and suddenly you start hearing people that are quite a distance from you.
Yeah.
Question? How local is local?
100 miles.
100 miles. Okay, thank you.
It depends. So it's a line of sight. So it depends on it depends on a lot of things. So it depends if you are high up or if you don't. If you are where you are. So usually on 6 meter, I can talk to. I don't know if you know the Bay Area, but I can talk to pretty easily to people that are in all the way to Sacramento or the foothills. Across the, so it can be between 50 and 150 miles on good days.
Okay.
On some days you cannot talk to anyone.
Right, and it will also vary by mode because of the way the energy is used on FM. Typically won't get as much distance. So people that want to go greater distance on 6 meters use single sideband. And people that want to go even farther will use digital modes like FT8, which somebody else mentioned while we lost Max. I've used FT8 on 20 meters and 40 meters, but it is also available to be used with the right software and computer setup on 6 meters.
I think FT8 is killing ham radio. Yeah, because so, okay, you can make a contact, but what is a contact? It's just an exchange of call sign for FT8. You don't even talk to the person. And the problem is on 6 meter, you have the openings are rare and they're magic. You know, it's magic because they are rare. And now when there is a possibility of opening, the people, they don't, you know, call on their microphone. They go directly on FT8. They don't even try the other modes. Sometimes they come back and try SSB, but there is way less people on 6 meter now that you have FT8 than before.
And are they using FT8 on 6 meters, or they're just using it on the other bands like 40, 20, and?
No, FT8 goes all the way to UHF if you want. Okay. If you have the radio for that.
So let's talk a bit about radios. For handhelds, most handhelds do not support 6 meters, but a few do, and I've listed 5 of them. The only one that I've ever used, I acquired just 2 or 3 weeks ago, or less actually. I tracked it down, used on eBay, and it looks like pretty much like a small 2 meter radio. This one is the one in the middle of this list, the Yaesu VX5R. It'd be very hard to track it down new, but this is a well-used radio that I got for $200, I think. I forget exactly. It has some minor issues, like the buttons are hard to read because they've been pushed so many times. But this little antenna certainly does look like a 2 meter antenna, doesn't it? So to make it a 6 meter antenna, I take this little top off, and I screw this extender on, and I haven't taken an X-Acto knife to take this extender off. I don't think this is really too much of an antenna because it's not making it long enough to be a quarter wave at 6 meters. That would be 1.5 meters that would be required to do that. So what it must be is a coil. So it's adding some inductance to get this to resonate, even though it's too short to be a normal quarter wave antenna. So you just got to not lose your extra pieces of antenna if you want to switch back and forth between the bands. The other way to do it, and I've done this locally just in the last week with some local hams, take the antenna off and use an adapter there and hook it to some coax and run it to my 6 meter antenna, and I'll talk about antennas in a minute. And this little tiny radio works much better with an actual 6 meter antenna that's I've got strung up in a tree, but it's less portable when you do it that way. Then as far as portable 6 meter radios, I've listed 3. I have no experience with any of them. Then there's a variety of mobile radios. Some of them are small enough so that you can easily imagine mounting them in a car or truck. The last one on the list is a little big to do that, but I'm sure there are plenty of people who've got their Yaesu 991s in vehicles. I do not. I have it as my desktop radio. It's rather expensive, but it covers 70 centimeters, 2 meters, 6 meters, and almost all of the HF bands, just a matter of which antennas you connect to it. And that's what I usually use for 6 meters because it will go up to 100 watts on 6 meters. My little handheld, I think, is probably 3 watts maximum. I need to look that up. So there's a variety of ways to get on 6 meters, depending on how much money you spend and how much flexibility you want for how many bands and how many watts, etc. Any questions about radios? For antennas, you can buy some commercial antennas. Here in the Portland area, the Diamond V2000 is real popular because it supports 70 centimeters, 2 meters, and 6 meters. Bit on the expensive side for the kind of antenna it is. Dual band antennas are usually under $100 plus the expensive tripod and mast. To save some money, you can give up going tri-band and get a 6 meter only antenna for well under $100. $64 is the last time I checked the Arrow GP52. You can also make your own roll-up J-pole by getting ladder line. If you've never come across ladder line, think about the type of cable that was used for rooftop antennas until recently. It's called twin lead. It's 2 wires spaced apart about ½ an inch by plastic. Ladder line is the same idea, except it's about this wide. By knowing the right measurements, you can cut a piece of ladder line and connect the top and then connect the bottom and take a chink out of one side and it becomes a J. You could also build a J pole. That would take more copper pipe than some, but it would be about 2 meters of pipe for the full J, because a J pole is typically 1/4 meter on radiation and about another 1/8 of a meter for the J part. So that I have not built one out of copper pipe yet, but maybe that'll be next. But the roll-up one made out of ladder line works really well. When I had it higher in the tree, it worked even better. But right now, I'm having trouble with getting over the branch I want to get over. But that's on my to-do list to get it up to a higher branch in the tree. And it kind of just hangs there in midair and feeds to my radio. You can also use a fancy mag mount. That's a pretty good deal. MFJ. I have no experience with it, but for $35, sounds like could be a way of going for 6 meters. And then if you want directional antennas, there's a variety of choices for 6 meter directional antennas. So they're quite a bit bigger than or approximately 3 times bigger than a 2 meter beam antenna. And then just for completeness, I list some tripods and some masts here on this next page. Maybe while I'm thinking of it, I'll get a link and copy the link and paste it in chat. So you can grab this link out of chat and look at it when you have more time. And let's see. I think I have the band plan here. If I can get this thing to scroll down. Yeah, here we go. So here's the ARRL band plan. It confirms that it's Morse code only in the first 100 kilohertz. Apparently beacons are legal as well. They're probably Morse code beacons. Then there's a little tiny piece of the band that ARRL recommends be for beacons only. And then one reserved for single sideband and Morse code. And then a little space for attempting things like spurious E propagation, and then a specific frequency for calling people on single sideband, then 300 kilohertz for all modes, and then 200 kilohertz for non-voice, a calling frequency for digital, and then there's some space reserved for repeater inputs and repeater outputs with some space in between for simplex communication, et cetera, et cetera. So it's been chopped up quite a bit, but I think that as hams, we're honor bound to try to live by this division, but it's not enforced by the FCC except for the first 100 kilohertz. Any questions about that? And then here in Oregon, there's a 6 meter band plan that's in a table. Let's see if I can bring that table up. And it's basically got a little bit of additional detail specific to Oregon. And they took out some detail as well. They're focusing on this particular organization that's focusing on repeaters. So they're focusing on allocating input and output frequencies for repeaters, and then acknowledging the some of the ARRL plan. So if you ever decide you want to put up a 6 meter repeater or any other repeater here in Oregon, you want to get in touch with this organization to get frequency assignments. Questions about band plans or anything else we talked about radios?
I just want to make a comment that a lot of people, I'm sure, as you're taking the test or studying your test for your technician, you've probably seen the ARRL national band plan that tells you kind of where, especially in HF frequencies, where you are recommended to transmit using only Morse code or Morse code and data versus single sideband. Yep, Bruce is holding it up right there. So that's really kind of a band plan for the nation. Now, each individual, well, I can't say each, but the local areas. So for Oregon, that would be the Oregon Radio Relay Council. They're the ones that coordinate the repeaters, and they kind of put together a band plan for 6 meters and above. Because the below 6 meters, it's not local. It's not just confined to local areas. When you talk on 10 meters under normal sunspot cycles, you can reach to the East Coast very easily around the world, but 6 meters and above is traditionally local. So if you go to the orrc.org website, you can actually take a look at the local band plans of where we, as hams, are recommended to talk simplex versus single sideband, simplex FM versus single sideband versus repeater inputs and outputs, weak signal, packet radio, things like that.
There's a similar organization for Western Washington. And then there's, to get a perspective on how the US divides things up on an honor basis, you go to the ARRL site and see the kind of the national band plan.
So if you haven't been to orrc.org, under the band plans on the front page, take a look there if you're in local to Oregon, or you'll have to just look up your local repeater council to see what they have kind of as recommendations for simplex frequencies and all the other modes that we have. Unfortunately, the ARRL does a really good job of putting it all kind of in a very nice, easy to read and understand visual format. Not all of the repeater councils do that. Oregon, they actually have a pretty good, like Bruce was showing you for 6 meters, a visualization kind of in a table format. So that was my comment. Thanks, Bruce.
I'll show you what ARRL has. 2 formats. It has the one that I just held up. I think you can see that at the bottom of my screen. But that's for the FCC rules that are enforced by government. And then if you go to this link, you get, oh, that's the same one again. Google is not saving me as like it usually does. Here we go. So these are the recommendations for all the bands that are divided up into smaller chunks typically, but not enforced by the additional divisions are not enforced by the FCC. So here's the table that I had in a slightly different format on the screen a minute ago. That's where I got it, the 6 meter band plan. And then here's what's recommended nationally for 2 meters. So it's not quite as pretty as the one pager that gives just the FCC recommendations. So anybody hear the additional mode that's in the background here, the whistling? Did anybody recognize what band that is, or what mode that is?
Cockatiel mode?
So somebody ask Max and Fred a question while I get another show and tell.
So I can say something. So there is one thing that Bruce didn't talk about is on 6 meter you can do a Meteor Scatter, and right now it's the right time to do those activities because we have the Perseids. You know, mid of August we have a lot of meteor. So you can use the 6 meter to bounce your signal out of a meteor and make contacts pretty far away like that.
So it was not a radio that you were hearing.
So what's his name?
Eva, and a friend of mine picked out the name because one of my other hobbies has to do with robots, and he said, well, Wally is the name of a boy robot, and so Wally's girlfriend was named Eva, so that's the parrot's name.
What kind of bird is that?
It's a version of an African gray called a timna. That you look at its tail, it's not particularly red. Normally an African gray has a very bright red tail. This one weighs about half as much as the Congo variety. But when she wants to, she can talk. She's got a pretty big English English vocabulary along with all the whistling noises.
So with you repeating CQ, CQ, CQ all the time, does it repeat that? Does she repeat that?
No, but she knows all the dog commands. One time I was trying to take a picture of this dog, and she kept rushing the camera. And Eva said, "Wait, wait," and I got the picture I needed.
That is a very pretty bird.
Anyway, sorry to take us off topic. So I think we're into the Q&A of some sort. So Max, you want to facilitate Q&A?
Yeah, absolutely. Does anybody have questions about 6 meters, or do you have anything that, like, have you operated 6 meters before?
Yeah, Leaf here, WB9IWT, Illinois.
Hey,
And
Leaf.
on the equipment that I own, I've got lots of radios from years and years. I really don't have anything to operate 6 meters. And I really don't want, I think probably the best bet would be to get a 6 meter radio. And you'd put up some names and titles, brands of radios and approximate costs. Where would be a good place for me to start? What vendor, or where would I go to try and begin to look for something that I could operate 2 meters?
6 meters?
6 meters.
Or if you want to start with 2?
No, six meters is what I'm interested. I'm sorry.
Okay, okay. Well, I can put that table up again, and the chat has the link to it. About at least half of those radios are out of production. So you could look at places like ham radio swap meets, and you heard me say I got one on eBay. But a few of them are available new, and you could shop at. I guess you're not here in Portland, but we have a ham radio outlet, Tiger. But hamradio.com is their website. There's also DX Engineering, and Max and Fred. What are your favorite outlets for ham radio equipment?
Gigaparts.
Gigaparts, right?
Oh yeah, Gigaparts is good people, and also Ham Radio Outlet. I've purchased stuff from them, so that's a good lead. And
I like Ham Radio Outlet because they have stores all over the US, and when you order something on their website, they ship from the store that is close to you, so you don't have to pay extra for shipping, and you receive the thing pretty quickly.
Oh, super! Thank you so very much. Thank you, thank you.
And sorry, Max, do you have a HF radio?
Oh yes, I do.
So because any recent radio on HF, they also include 6 meters. It's really rare right now to have a HF radio without the 6 meters.
Well, except my radios. My radio that I use every day is a Yaesu FT101 Echo Echo that I bought brand spanking new in 1975.
Yeah, that's a 1975.
That's a beautiful radio. But the newest radio I have is right here down in front of me, is in the ICOM 718. And I bought that to do FT8, to do digital work. And I've got several other HF radios, but they're all old enough that they don't have 6 meters.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask, Leaf, are you looking for like a handheld, a mobile, or a base station?
Probably a handheld. I think that's
Okay.
We're not talking, if it's like other bands, I'm sure that, extra power is nice, but if conditions are right, 4 or 5 watts will get you just about anywhere. Because I am a QRP fan. I did put together a BidX radio, and I absolutely love it. It works great, and I've worked the world on 5 watts.
Nice.
So
Yeah, I have a. Oh, go ahead.
If you're a QRP guy, so you're going to work most of the time using SSB or CW.
Most likely, yes.
Okay, so if you're working SSB or CW, you should you can build a dipole that will work pretty well on 6 meters. You can build a Moxon. You can build something. So basically, try to not use a ground plane antenna or something like that, because those antennas they're more for FM than for SSB and CW.
Good. Well, you know, it might be an excuse to buy a new radio. I saw one of the ones you'd listed. I did write down the Yaesu FT 891 that was like 800 and some dollars, and it was 160 through 6. And I said, maybe I need a new radio.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think is that a 100-watt or a 50-watt radio?
I have a 891. It's a 100-watt radio.
Yes. So it's a little heavy for backpacking, but it's actually a wonderful mobile and base station.
Well, that may be the ticket. Thank you so much, fellows.
Yeah.
Bruce, I don't see the link on the group chat.
Oh, the link on the chat?
I see the Ham Expo link, but I don't see
Yeah,
the
I don't
link
think it
to the
got put in there.
to the
Oh, that's weird. Let's see if I paste this time.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yeah, go ahead.
I was looking at because for the 6 meters, the handhelds, I'm reading those are simplex, yeah? And then can I assume that the HF plus 6s are digital and simplex? Or am I understanding that correctly?
Can you give me an example from one of the ones on the page, what you're asking about? Maybe I can give.
Yeah, so for a use case, I see that you can, for FT8, you can do single sideband on 2 meters. And then like my handheld Yaesu FT65 can do 2 meter simplex, but not digital. So I can't FT8 with that one. I can only FT8 with my G90. It can do 10, but it doesn't do 6, but it's digital and not simplex. So that's where I am in my understanding. I'm sure you explained it. Didn't get it.
Max and Fred can help sort this out, but one of the issues is how do you interface? In some sense, all radios are analog radios, and you typically connect them to a computer to go digital, and so it becomes a question of what kind of cable to use and what kind of interface to condition the signals between the two. And some radios make that easy by having a data port, and there are vendors who will sell you the right cable that will go between USB for most laptop computers to the data port on the radio. In other cases, you can get it to work if you buy a magic interface box. There's a company called Tigertronics that makes a box called Signal Link and they sell a variety of cables for that will give you more flexibility in how you would connect a radio to a computer. Recently, some people told me that for certain circumstances, you want to go to a Tigertronics competitor because they sell a different box that's even better than the Signal Link. But it's the same general idea of providing an interface between what's fundamentally a digital thing called a computer and what's fundamentally an analog thing, a radio. So what did I leave out, Max and Fred?
I can clarify just a few things. So first of all, you said simplex, and so that has nothing to do with the digital. Simplex is when you transmit on one frequency and you receive on the same frequency. So for example, if you talk to your friend with your handheld, you probably going to talk in simplex. When you talk to a repeater, you talk in half duplex because you're transmitting on one frequency, but you're receiving on the different frequency. Those things have nothing to do with digital. One of the problems you're going to have with HT, if you want to do FT8, is like Bruce said, you're going to have a problem to kind of connect that HT to your computer. And the second problem you're going to have with the HT is going to be in FM. And for digital mode, what you want, unless there is some very specific modes for that, but usually the digital mode, they are on SSB. So if you have a HT, it won't do SSB, and you won't be able to work some of the digital mode, most of the digital mode with a handheld, because your handheld doesn't do SSB. And then the problem, like Bruce said, some radio, they're easy to connect to a computer, and some of them, they're harder to connect to a computer. It depends on what kind of radio, if it's a modern radio, an old radio, etc., etc.
So if I understand correctly, the Yaesu FX5R is not SSB.
No.
SSB would be in the range of the Yaesu FT818.
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you very much. I appreciate
Or the 891, or some of the other radio, the mobile radio.
Yeah, and it gets confusing because on 2 meters and 70 centimeters, we talk about WinLink, and which is until recently was called packet mode, and there's a new one called VARA, and there's slow scan TV, and all of those can be done with FM radios. While, as Fred said, some of the other modes are not compatible with FM, and so you need a transceiver that can modulate with single sideband. It's
also some of them, they are maybe compatible, but no one will listen to you on FM because SSB, you go farther on SSB, so the people, they choose SSB to make contacts farther.
Right, right. And put another way, some digital modes are to do interesting things like email and television, and some digital modes are optimized for maximum distance, and nobody would think about sending a still picture over them. They want to communicate by voice or little text messages.
I have a question. It's actually on a DMR. Not yet. I have a DMR radio, and I'd like to find out how I can use it in the local area. Like, I know I need code plugs, and I'm wondering if there's a resource that I could access to get the code plugs for local DMR. If anyone has any recommendations, I would appreciate that.
Not me. I've recently bought a radio that has DMR, but I haven't tried that feature yet. Anybody on that's been using DMR?
I actually don't have any for the Oregon area, but Bay Area, I actually was able to get some code plugs. If you're really, I guess, I was going to take a look just to see if there's any organizations here in the Portland area. But essentially what you do need to do is, so you have your DMR radio, and then you'll need to find kind of a local repeater where you can talk through. If there's not a local repeater that you can talk through, you can always either buy or make a hotspot. Fred can talk a little bit about hotspots, but it's kind of a repeater inside your house for not very much money. But it's always helpful, to just get a code plug, especially when you're first starting. And code plugs, for those of you who don't know, as you program an analog radio, your handheld radio, it's usually fairly easy. You're looking for, especially through repeaters, you're looking for an input and output frequency, whether or not it uses tone or PL, and then what that tone is. So analog, it's not very difficult. Whereas with digital, it's a lot more settings beyond that. Sometimes it can be color code and time slot and getting contacts in your radio. And so sometimes rather than having everybody go out and programming their own radio, a lot of people will spend a lot of time and they will produce these code plugs or programming files that you can then just upload to your digital radio or DMR radio. And it makes it a lot easier because then you don't have to sit there and program all these things in. Now, if you do work a lot with DMR radio, eventually you're going to want to know how or learn how to go in and either modify your code plug or just go in and program your own radio. And then Fred, I know you have quite a bit of knowledge on this. Do you ever want to?
Yeah, if you're starting on DMR, so DMR is one of the most complex digital mode right now out there. So my advice would be to you try to Google. I don't know the Portland area, but you try to Google for a local repeater. Usually they have a website, and they have a somewhere they should have a code plug that you can download for your radio. To put the code plug in your radio, you're going to need some software that goes with your radio, and then you can download that thing. If you have some problem, the best way would be to find a club, or contact the people on that repeater and try to send them an email or something like that, and they will explain to you. They will, I'm sure people in Portland are nice, and they will help you to set up your radio. But the thing is, you said, I want to talk to local people, but what does it mean local for you?
I don't necessarily need to talk to local people. Local people are the ones who are going to help me find Portland code plugs for our local repeater.
Okay,
That's
because most of the time the people they talk to, the world we're using.
Sorry.
Yeah.
That I figured the people in local clubs might be able to help me find what works around here. I only say that because the code plugs here aren't going to be the same as the code plugs in Illinois, for example.
No.
Right. So I want to find out what they are here.
Yeah.
And I reached out to the chat, the Rag and Shoe, the Portland Amateur Radio Club's got a bulletin board, an old-fashioned bulletin board. And so I submitted a question to the moderator to try to post it to get some kind of dialogue, hoping that somebody in the area or in the club might have some recommendation.
And which club was that?
The Portland Amateur Park.
Oh, okay. Yeah, great.
I don't know if it's been posted yet, but I submitted one to the moderator.
Okay, it should be posted as long as you post it at the RagChew, because anybody can join, and then you can post right after you join. And I don't think that the posts are moderated. So
then I'll check it. Might have done incorrectly then.
Okay, I found Pacific Northwest Digital.net, PNW Digital.net, and it looks like they have a groups.io, and you do need to join them. So if you go click on their groups.io, you just apply for a membership. And it does look like they were more active in the past in 2020, but it looks like there's at least a few messages couple messages every day. And this specifically, it looks like they're offering people, let's see, the latest code plugs, repeater map, things like that. So that may be a good place to start.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Cool. Any other questions about 6 meters or ham radio?
Quick comment, if I may. We locally, I do check in with the local group 2 meter on a 2 meter repeater in the morning. Nice chaps. We do it almost every morning. And we've taken to not calling amateur radio a hobby. Amateur radio is a service. Antennas may be a hobby. Mobile setups, working and fixing and repairing and building antennas. But FCC isn't really nuts about amateur radio. And I think that if we call it a service rather than a hobby, might be a movement that all of us might think about when we talk to others on the air, is to call it a service rather than a hobby. So just see what you think, but that's something that our little group has really tried to push.
No, that's a good point. Yeah, because sometimes, if we just refer to it as a hobby, we kind of get lost. And there's a lot of work that's being done by Bruce and I'm sure a lot of other people on this call, where every week they're doing activities that are supporting our local public agencies. So thanks, Leif.
Yeah, no problem. But I think it's a great point with all the things that were going on with local disaster recovery and the things that we've set up nets to do and volunteer to really step in when we're needed. So calling it a service rather than a hobby, I think is just really a very smart move on our part.
Yep.
Yeah, about half the people on the call are
Yeah.
members of either the Neighborhood Emergency Team Program or the Multnomah County Aries Program, both.
And you guys do a lot of work, I know, every week, simplex nets, repeater nets, exercises, and these are all in support of the local served agencies that you guys have. No, that's great.
Comment.
Yeah.
I just, based on that, and that's where I'm at, I've got into this just to help out with the net business. So I guess my bottom line question is, what is the purpose of 6 meter other than?
Jim, great question. I should have mentioned that up front. The Multnomah County Aries has spent a fair amount of time thinking about that question. And I think it started with as a problem rather than a solution. We have a fair amount of room on the 70 centimeter band, and we could allocate a variety of simplex frequencies, and actually we're working on that for special purposes. But to speak figuratively, 70 centimeters doesn't bend very well. And if there's anything at all in the way, the signal doesn't get through. The good news is 2 meter bends okay, but the problem with 2 meters is so darn popular that every county in the Portland area keeps grabbing the frequencies, and we keep running out of frequencies on 2 meters.
Right.
So what am I getting at? 6 meters is not a huge band, but it's not heavily used in Portland. And so there's a bunch of Multnomah County Aries people that are experimenting with voice communication and with a version of WinLink on 6 meters. And that's why some of us have put up antennas in trees or otherwise to start practicing 6 meters. And a term that we use that's, I don't think it's well defined, but might define itself figuratively, is using 6 meters as a back channel, where the official net is on 2 meters, and maybe part of that net is also on 70 centimeters connected by a crossband repeater. But there's so much going on that particular net. What if you need to have a side conversation? Well, those that have 6 meters agree to a 6 meter frequency to hold those side conversations. And 6 meters doesn't hit everywhere in Portland from every other point, but it bends so well that with the right antenna, you can get really good coverage for not much antenna money. It's just radio money you have to spend. So I managed to kind of confuse the topic, but it does have a place at the county level here in Multnomah County. Linda, do you have anything you want to add?
No, just the city of Portland is also placing more reliance on 6 meter as well. They have a brand new 6 meter antenna on top of the Portland Emergency Coordination Center.
Right, I'd forgotten about that.
Well, that's helpful. Thanks, Bruce.
You're welcome.
Question? Yeah, Bruce, just to continue that, if you're having that conversation on 6 meter FM, you probably want a vertically polarized antenna. And with some of the WinLink stuff, would you also use FM and vertical polarization, or would there, some people use SSB and get into horizontal for local?
Everybody I know right now is using vertical, with maybe 1 or 2 exceptions. And I forget whether they set up horizontal 6 meters for DX, or whether it was just more convenient in their particular location. Anybody know anybody in Portland that's running horizontal 6 meters?
The problem is if you have a vertical antenna like the one you showed, the ground plane antenna, vertical it's easy. But if you have a Yagi antenna, putting a 6 meter Yagi antenna vertical is going to be very hard because the elements are pretty long, and that's why people who are doing You know, they're trying to do a DX or thing like that. They're always going to have a horizontally
Horizontal.
polarized antenna.
Yeah, good insight, Fred. So I have a 2 meter Yagi, and right now I have it connected to a fiberglass pole because the vertical elements will otherwise couple with an aluminum mast. But for a 6 meter Yagi with vertical polarizing, it would be, you'd have to have an awfully strong piece of fiberglass to hold it up, or you would need exactly the right spacing off of a metal pole to get it to work vertical. So you avoid all those issues if you go horizontal. Is what I think Fred is saying.
And yeah, I mean, that's basically, yeah,